Good day to you all. My name is Raj Thabaratnasingham, and what follows is my second video. I spoke in my first video about the UNHRC process, genocide, ICC, ICJ, giving explanation. CTC team has been at the UNHRC session since 2009. For this year, we have had meetings with important people in the Office of the High Commissioner in February itself in advance of the 55th session. CTC Advocacy team had many members through these years. However, have been coordinating their international advocacy for almost 15 years now. While early on it was a question of being in Geneva for the March, June, and September session, we made a name for ourselves so that we can lobby by meeting decision makers even before the session starts nowadays. In 2001, we were in Geneva, Washington, D.C., and New York at UN headquarters and few embassies, all high-level meetings. In 2002 and 2003, we had Zoom sessions, meeting in Washington, D.C., and another personal meeting in German Foreign Ministry in Berlin, before the latest resolution was passed in September 2022. This was all possible through our association with Global Tamil Forum. They are one of the most influential participants in diaspora efforts. I will do a separate video in the future about that. Today I'm going to talk about sanctions, as some people are spreading rumors we have given up advocacy completely. I'm sure this is all false information because I showed you the first video, which showed how much involvement we have with UNHRC itself. For today, please look at our release of February 14, 2014. We started talking about sanctions then itself. It's not something new to us. Based on the FAE report I showed in the first video, our release urged the government to take financial and diplomatic sanctions against perpetrators of international crimes 10 years ago. It's not something new. Fast forward to 2019, when Lieutenant General Shavendra Silva was appointed as commander of the Sri Lankan army. We waited one day to see what the reaction is going to be from the world stage. US Embassy in Sri Lanka put out a statement. UN Human Rights Commissioner put out a statement. European Union put out a joint statement, and ITJP put out a statement. So we put all of that in a release and called Canada to do the same. Canadian High Commissioner tweeted on the next day, August 21st, a statement, and ever since then we have been following up at every opportunity to get Canada to act on sanctions. On August 26, 2019, this is 6 days later, we met with the foreign minister along with other groups and individuals who were invited. We were told it was a Tamil community stakeholder meeting organized by Gary Ananda Sangari. The meeting was under the Chatham House rule. That means we can say what was said at the meeting but cannot attribute to who said what. This is constantly flouted by other groups from Canada that comes there. I've seen it in many meetings where they come and they're told that the meeting is under Chatham House rule. The moment they get out, they're on radio or TV talking about who said what. It's very unfortunate, but it happens. Attendees at this meeting talked about ICC, ICJ, referendum, genocide, and few also mentioned sanctions. Only one group talked exclusively about Magnitsky Act and the importance of sanctions. Since we were meeting the foreign minister, we also gave the letter that we wrote on August, or the release we had on August 20, 2019 to her personally. In October, Switzerland government organized a meeting for 19 Tamil diaspora members from around the world called Dealing with the Past. There were other organizations from Canada, USA, UK, Switzerland, Norway. Switzerland had such meeting with various groups like civil society from north and east, other parts of Sri Lanka. I believe they had meeting with other communities, army personnel, politicians from all communities, and many other groups. All costs were covered by Switzerland government, just like they do whenever they try different ways of bringing people together to solve the problem that affects all the people in Sri Lanka or any other country. They are a very friendly country, very neutral country, so they do this all the time. It does not mean they give us or CTC money, they just cover our costs directly or through an NGO. So this is an issue that came up in one of the meetings recently, so I just want to make sure that you understand how it's done. In the interest of time, I'm just going to run through some of our other releases. In November 2019, Gotabaya Rajapaksa was elected as the president of Sri Lanka. Around that time, Honorable Francois Philippe Champagne became the foreign minister. Of course, we brought to his attention what the new president has said when he got elected. He basically said that he got elected because of the Sinhalese people and indirectly indicated that people that he's going to be interested in looking after. In connection with the sanctions, our team member attended a meeting in the USA in January of 2020, and in February 2020, when USA sanctioned Commander Shavendra Silva, CTC on February 17 wrote a letter to the foreign minister calling for similar action in Canada. In order to expedite this process, I believe we may be the first organizers to establish contact with the Sanctions Department. We submitted publicly available information to the Sanctions Department. During the pandemic, in July 29, we proactively arranged a Zoom call with the Canadian Sanction Group and the Geographic Group. They call it Geographic Group. I think they covered different regions. Our team had an extensive discussion with 5 of their senior people after they provided the Sanction Department box and the process. In the next month, we collected publicly available information and provided to them. This was an extensive process, and August 17, 2020, we completed the processes. All materials submitted to Sanction Department are confidential. I believe 2 weeks later, Gary Anandasangari called Danton Thuraraja at CTC office and asked for copies of what we submitted, which were forwarded to Gary Anandasangari. As the Sanction Department was not aware of the FAAE report, remember I mentioned FAAE report in my first video, we directed them to the appropriate government site to access them. In September 2020, we met with Sven Spengemann, chair of the Liberal Human Rights Council, and provided all the information and asked him to press for sanction. At this time, it's important to mention why this type of sanctions is more political process and why we kept pressurizing the politician. On August 9, 2020, this is when this process was going on, Belarus had its election. There were a lot of protests, irregularities, arbitrary errors. Canada implemented sanctions related to Belarus on September 28, 2020. Remember, they had the election on August 9, 2020. Canada sanctioned on September 28, 2020. That's just 50 days after the election. These sanctions on 11 people were enacted under the Special Economic Measures Act, called CEMA, in response to gross and systematic human rights violation. In our case, we were pressing for sanctions because of a war that took place 14 years ago. And even then, at that time, Not one person had been sanctioned in Sri Lanka. Our sanction discussion continued with another letter on November 10, 2020. More pressure was exerted by email to about 47 members of parliament calling for sanctions. And that letter was sent out on November 26, 2020. CTC in that letter asked why Belarusians were sanctioned but not even one from Sri Lanka. To speed this process and to simultaneously advance work at UNHRC, we asked for a meeting with our UN Ambassador Bob Ray on December 3, 2020, and finally met him on January 19, 2021, via Zoom to talk about UNHRC and sanctions. In February 2021, in collaboration with GTF, New York University's Center for Human Rights and Global Justice, Sri Lanka Campaign for Peace and Justice, CTC had a webinar to get expert advice and input from people like Charles Petrie, who produced the Secretary General's Internal Review Panel report on Sri Lanka, Pablo de Graaf, UN Special Rapporteur, Stephen Rapp, former US Ambassador at Large on Global Justice, and other politicians and activists from Sri Lanka. The links they were then provided to the sanctions department, so they had some valuable contribution towards that. There was yet another foreign minister change. We wrote in April 2021 asking for sanctions, and again on December 30, 2021, when the current foreign minister became the new foreign minister. As you can see, we have been relentless in our pursuit to get Canada to act. In 3 years, we had 3 different foreign ministers, but we wrote to all of them. Finally, on January 10, 2023, Canada announced sanctions under regulation pursuant to special economic measures against 4 Sri Lankan state officials. I suggest everyone read the detail on the Canada website. The sanctions specifically covers 2 areas. Simply put, no financial dealings with them, and individuals sanctioned are barred from entering Canada. Just like we have done with UNHRC, in the sanctions department, too, CTC had worked very hard before sanctions were imposed on 4 individuals. Compare this to sanction on 2,600 individuals and entities from Russia, Belarus, Ukraine, and Moldova who had been sanctioned. Out of this, 223 from Belarus, that's from 2020 to now, 223 plus from Belarus. So there is still work to be done. I hope our Tamil politician, federal and provincial government are working on it now, that CTC and few other groups have shown that path. In Tamil, they say, Mudal Konal, Muttrum Konal. And I was watching the Canadian Tamil Collective press conference, and it started with a minute of silence. And in the minute of silence, all 5 of you stood up, and what was read out was completely wrong. It's detrimental to what we are trying to do at CTC and people in Sri Lanka, and I'll explain why. The comment you made was, of course, a moment of silence for the soldiers who died, and that was fine. But then you followed it up by saying, and for the people who perish because of the violence or terrorism by Sri Lanka and India. The fact that you brought in India in this is very detrimental to us. Number one, in order to solve the problem in Sri Lanka, we need Sri Lanka, period. Nobody else is going to come and help people there. Second one is, as a superpower and our neighbor, India is very important. And by making this statement there, do you know that you may be refused entry to come into India? Recently, in August of 2023, a person who wrote a book from Toronto was deported from Singapore. So I would suggest that keep your remarks to reasonable ones so that our community on the whole doesn't get affected. Thank you very much. There's one thing that I learned from this press meet was the timeline, and I'll just run through that. There was somebody from the press, from Ulahat Tamler, and he said he was at the 2001 meeting when CTC was formed. And I know from certificate of incorporation that it was incorporated in 2001. And also, I think Father Chandrahandan mentioned that Abhi Singham was a founder, and that's a fact. There is 4 more people on the certificate of incorporation. Then the rest of you, I'll see whether I can capture what you said there. Lakshmi Vasan said 2001 she joined, 2002 she headed the immigration and refugee resettlement group of about 80 to 100 people in that big seminar that they had in a hotel. And Father Chandrahandan mentioned that he joined somewhere between 2001 2002. He was at that meeting as well. And then subsequently, the CTC was dormant in 2003 2004. Then he became president in 2005 2006. Nidan Shan, there was no timeline given, but whoever mentioned his name said that he's been there around from CTC's inception, and he's been more or less been active with CTC since then. Mario Pushparatnam, the timeline was very clear in 2009, and that's when I joined CTC as well. So let me get this correct. Now, all of you were there except Mario in 2003, and it went dormant 2003, 2004. In a company term, it went bankrupt. And Danton and David Pubalapalle, Danton Thurraja and David Pubalapalle tell me all the time that when they took over this office, it was one office in a bigger office, just one room. There were some boxes and not even a pencil or phone for that office. So it was more or less bankrupt at that time. And they, together with Father Chandrahandan, started the first 2 years. They built up CTC and slowly moved it up. And then, of course, members and well-wishers brought it up to this level right now. And these are the very same people who want to come and help CTC to put back to in shape. I mean, if it's not broken, I mean, the saying goes, if it's not broken, don't fix it. That's the analogy. Let me also make it very clear, this is my own video, nothing to do with CTC, as I mentioned in my first video. Now that I'm out of CTC from any position, I'm just an ordinary member, but I have CTC's welfare in my mind all the time. So let me just go through Ask Lakshmi Vasan. And if you were so interested and you came up with the proposal in 2002, how come it went bankrupt very soon after that? Abhi Singham, the same thing. How come it got bankrupt very soon after that? Father Chandravandan, of course, said very clearly that it went dormant, and he came back again in 2004 and 5, 2005 and 6. And then Nitin Shan, I didn't hear anything. So going back, I will talk on some of the things that you talked about. Not all of it, but very few things. So let me pick on Nitin Shan one. Neithan Shan said that we were not, our CTC was not saying the same thing that he was promoting, which is genocide. And he pointed out to the 10th anniversary of Muliwaikal. And that is true because on the 10th anniversary, I remember he putting on his webpage, be a leader, CTC, be a leader or get out of the way. This is the same Neithan Shan contested the first election in, I believe, in 2003. So in 2023, in 10 years, he's contested 11 elections. And out of the 11 election, he's won only 4 election, and that's a success rate of 36.3%. And he is telling CTC, be a leader or get out of the way. And I'll tell you, Neithan Shan, that I worked on an election in a particular riding, and this particular candidate put his name first, and he specifically told you he's putting his name, but you came and contested against him, and both of you, and he came second, you came third. The person who won again in this particular race won by a few thousand votes. If there was only one Tamil contestant, then the other person would have won. So keep that in mind, please, when you talk. Abhi Singham, I think Father Chandrakandan mentioned him as founding father. Founding father is usually used for people who have built up something and brought it up. CTC was just an organization, and it was never built up because if it went bankrupt in 2 years, then there was never any formalized agreement that came into being, except there was a beautiful constitution that came into being in 2001. It was modified slightly in 2009, 2010, and then in 2016, just to change the AGM date. That's it. So going back to what the comment Mario made at the UN HRC meeting because of the genocide usage, I do remember telling Mario when he went there that we don't use that word, so be very careful when you're working with others. And we worked in a group with BTF and US TAG, so I'm sure he felt, but I've given my reason in the first video. I've said why we don't use that word. Second thing, somebody asked government funding, and Mario said yes. No, the government does, unlike all the other organizations, most of the other organizations that's there in Toronto, CTC is not funded by government, period. CTC get funding for projects, and I can speak for 2 projects, which is when we went to Canada 150, celebrated Canada 150 in Ottawa. We got funding for that, but we had to bring in some more funding to make sure that the process goes through, and every cent, whether we collect from outside or from the government funding, had to be accounted for. Another one that we did was with the indigenous people. We had a community engagement with the indigenous people, and we had to spend the same amount as the government gave, and we have to give it to the government to prove. So there is no steady government funding coming for CTC by any means. So please don't use that word when you're talking about. Father Chandrakandan is a respected community leader, and I was surprised to see him there in that lineup. We did not sign a pact with Sri Lankan government or with any of the leaders that we met. It was just merely giving the declaration that we made. And just a comment here, declaration is something that a declaration of war. So it can be, a declaration can be made before or after. So Neithan Shan went on for a few minutes about declaration. So I just want to clarify the declaration part and ask him to look up the dictionary. CTC was banned in 2014 and again in 2021. So I know what a persona non grata is. So we went through that process as well. This sanction is under CIMA, and it's very specific to no financial transaction with the person who's been made persona non grata, and he or she cannot come to Canada. That's it. So please check that for your information. So being there to give an important document with all of the leaders, different leaders that we had to do, so that even with Rajapaksa, it was not something Canada will frown upon. Certainly not illegal. The whole press conference must have used about 25 times that we are not here to destroy CTC, or we want CTCs to prosper and all of that. But the mere fact that you went through all of that process, it was more like we don't want to destroy CTC, and then the next line, boom, a punch. CTC is okay if you reform this, apologize to us and all of that, boom, another one. So this is what went on there. How come towards the end there was a lady who got up and said something about 90 million rupees being given to CTC, to Sumandran, and to this thing? Why didn't one of you all ask her for explanation? Because all these unwanted stuff you left hanging around there are a lot of people who will think that those things are true. So it's very unfortunate. That's why I'm going to do another video explaining some of the things, more extensive one. I'll go through the press conference in very detail and come back again. Thank you very much, everyone. Have a good day. Bye for now.